Beloved brothers and sisters and soul family, welcome to this live stream. Being called all morning, and I'm like, what are we being called into communicating about, dear God, Source, Creator? What is it that you would like me to transmute through the energy field in this glorious day where I have crawled out of bed in this amazing deliciousness of human reality? What are we here to discuss? I'm Geeia Ariati. I'm of sound heart and sound mind, although that may look very challenging to the mind of separation. This is who I be in this reality. I am the assigned oracle for the 144 and beyond, and I am a speaker of truth. If you have not listened to any of my transmissions before, please come into your heart space, have some play, some fun, some curiosity, and breathe in and breathe out to receive all of the activations and information in between the words, because I hold some pretty cool things that get sent through the ether. So if you would like some DNA upgrades, and for some of your memory to return, if you are tuning into this, it's because you have a resonance and a curiosity around Egypt and the story of Egypt. Maybe you were present in Egypt. Maybe your lineage or your bloodline is Egyptian heritage. I do not know where we are going with this because it is such a big story, but I feel like the best way for me to start is to share with you how I remembered and became aware of the I am of Goddess Isis, or if it's in truth, it's actually Goddess Isis. So the Goddess Isis means magic, and she was an incarnation here to bring magic in that form, in that reality, in that dimensional plane of existence. And the timeline of ancient Egypt was actually a 7th dimensional timeline. And there was an ability to see magic in form in different ways to that of what we see in this current now day waking moment of our reality. So to start, I have done multiple transmissions. They've been more from a very channeled perspective in this because I wanted to be very precise and clear. So the very first transmission I did was exposing myself and uncloaking myself as this individual consciousness. I am Geeia Ariati. I am many things, and I am integrated in the Isis consciousness. However, she is not all I be. I am an unique expression of God Source Creator, just like every single one of you are. But I did have to go through multiple initiations and remembrances to embody and bring back these fragmented parts of myself so I could become more whole in my I am in this present moment. So that is why it is important to travel into the past to reclaim that which has been lost, that has been taken, that has been stolen or given away. So it is about remembering the belief, the narrative, and the experience so that we can integrate ourselves into wholeness. The only reason to look back is to find where you have disconnected or separated from the totality of who you are. Now, if I had have chosen in this incarnation to come in pure presence and stay in the maintenance of the wholeness of the I am, I would not have had to travel back to see. However, I am a very influential being on this planet, as many of us are, here with a big mission to assist the earth to come into heaven on earth and to create a new foundational structure of us moving into a 5D paradigm. And because of that, I was unable in my human experience to claim that of which I be, because that is a lot. Right? It's a lot when you start to remember, and this was a big part of a challenge for me, very big challenge for me. I don't say this lightly. I don't say I am the goddess Isis lightly. I don't say that from the truth of the knowing without the awareness of what that holds and what I'm saying. So and I know it to be absolutely, undeniably the truth. And I want to share how that came up because it's very important for those that are going through their healing journey. For those that are moving through and they're looking at their belief systems and they're looking at information and they're trying to come into sovereignty and transcendence and to release themselves from the entrapment programming. And what is really important is to recognize that sometimes we're trying to fix things from a three-dimensional lens. We're trying to fix things or we're trying to return ourselves to wholeness from this lens of seeing where I'm getting triggered and activated. And we're placing old stories from this incarnation on top of something that might be lifetimes old. It might be from the beginning of universal consciousness old. It might be galactically old. It could be even cosmically old. And when you are looking at something that's repeating and there's an activation, there's a trigger that comes up in your reality, and you are trying to fix it from a three-dimensional realm of your human interpretation, you're probably not going to find the core aspect of it unless you have learned to journey into the depths of the separation point and you are able to navigate that and look at all of the multidimensionality of it. So there's a point in the journey of spirituality and self-attainment or enlightenment where you come to a point where you need to expand beyond your three-dimensional belief systems, and you need to expand your capacity and your tools with consciousness. And that's where quantum healing becomes helpful, karmic, past life remembrance, and all of those pieces. So how I began, and I'm going to talk a bit about Egypt in what I know, and use it to help activate your remembrance through hearing the story, through someone who has remembered, who has journeyed and has extensively journeyed. And I'm going to speak into some pretty uncomfortable things. So you did not miss much. No, you are joining just in time. 6 minutes of nice intro. So how I began my journey of remembrance of Egypt and as goddess Isis. Basically, in my human experience, I was attracting this dynamic of relationship. I kept going. Like everyone, I've explored, I've seeked, I've self-realized, I've done the experiential learning, and I kept repeating this piece where I wanted union as a relationship. That was my truth. And I tried to manipulate myself and see if it was conditioning. Did I have an attachment to monogamy and all of these things? Because I kept repeating this program or this pattern of meeting a man that had a girlfriend or had an open relationship or was in polyamory. And so this went over a 2-year period where I was the second woman, and I was desperately wanting to be chosen by this man, right? So I gave up myself. I did lots of things. I triggered myself. Anyway, I got to a point where I'd looked at all of these beliefs. I'd used it for so much healing. I was like, okay, what is true in relationship? My truth is that if I love someone, I allow them to be a sovereign being. My truth is that if they love me, they allow me to be a sovereign being. But in that, when we love each other and we are able to love each other in truth, there is an honor that I take you as on myself and you take me as of yourself. So everything I do in this reality, I think about how that would affect you and all of the experience. So what came to me was that that was my truth. And I'd really looked at this dynamic in this incarnation, in this human 3D reality. Now, I attracted what turned out to be interesting. I now know that he was one of the original Anunnaki and one of the 12 of the divine race. And I attracted this man into my life who, at the time, I didn't realize was seeing another woman. And so it was through this experience that I was like, how is this here again? I've looked at the constructs. I've looked at my core wounds. I don't understand. How could I be recreating this? I know my truth. And I was so angry, so upset, so hurt that I'd found myself in this second chosen woman situation again. And I literally was in desperation. And I was like, okay, I don't care what it is, God. And I looked up at the sky and I was like, I don't care what this is, but show me what I'm not seeing so that I don't recreate this, because it hurt, right? It hurt. It doesn't feel nice to not be chosen. It doesn't feel nice to be the second one. It doesn't feel nice to constantly repeat the same pattern, right? So I laid down on the floor. I was on the carpet. I had no idea what I was doing. I just laid down in desperation. Show me, closed my eyes, went into this moment of channeled receivership. And I was vortexed back to ancient Egypt. And I saw myself in a temple. And I saw all of these other priestesses and these goddess energies and this pharaoh. And there was all these women adorning him and making love with him and putting all this energy into him. And I felt this sticky, slimy energy of betrayal and seduction and jealousy and competitiveness. And I was overwhelmed. My whole body was shaking. I was in a cellular memory where I was like in anxiousness. And what was amazing was I was then pulled out straight away. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, did that just happen? I had only had a glimpse of a past life before, and I didn't even know if I believed in past life. My mom is a past life hypnotherapist. She took me through a past life memory once, and I was like, I made it up, right? So that's what the brain does. The brain goes into, I made it up. That couldn't possibly be real. So I was sitting there in this process of, I don't think that was what's caused my relationship challenges. This has been a big pattern, right? It couldn't cost, like, what was that? What did I just see? And I was really shook by it. I felt the remembrance. I felt it within me, but I found it very challenging to look at. I had a lot of resistance to believing any of that was true because I knew the power that I also held in that memory. Now, as life does and as source does, as you start to remember and as you start to go into these historical parts of yourself, you will start to receive the confirmation. So the next day, I went into a news agency that I never do, and I was walking past the big box of word puzzles, and I just happened to glance down in there to get a pen with a friend, something that I would not normally do. And there at the top of all of the crosswords, no other magazines, only crosswords, was a book that said History of Ancient Egypt, and it had Sekhmet and the Temple of Isis written on the front page. And I was like, okay, I have to pick this up and buy this. I don't know what this means. I didn't know who any of the gods or the goddesses was. I had no cognitive awareness. I'd never, ever gone and researched ancient history. It had no relevance in my experience as to what I was journeying. I just wanted to heal my trauma. I just wanted to live in some level of peace and step out of my nervous system responses. I just wanted to live a sense of happiness, right? That's usually what it is. I wanted to get out of suffering. I wasn't there to become some influential, life-changing guide to humanity. I was there to step out of my story. That was it. Like pain, I don't want pain. And as I learned I could get out of pain, I didn't want others to experience the pains, the suffering, and the aloneness, the abandonment, and the unlovable feelings that I felt. And so that's what drove me. It was, I felt this, I want to get out of it, and I don't want anyone else in the world to ever feel that way. And so as I was moving through this, I then went and did what most people do at that point in their time. I jumped on Google and I was like, all right, what is this? I actually flicked through the magazine and I energetically was like, okay, what in the magazine is calling me? Because I don't know what these words are. I don't know what I'm looking for. And I landed on a page and it took me into the information of a specific temple that I cannot remember right now. And I Googled it and it took me into the awareness of the gods' wives of Akhenaten and the drunken ceremonies. Now, as I was listening to these YouTube videos, and if you've done a lot of remembrance, for me, I was very somatic. So the somatic remembrance was I was shaking there. I was like, I was in that ceremony. I've been in this drunken ceremony before. What is going on in my body? This is a lot. And it just flooded in. And from that point, right, from that point of first initially opening the doorway to see beyond my current now reality, I spent every day for 18 months journeying Isis's consciousness. Now, this was extremely challenging because I also live in a three-dimensional reality, and I was being activated by my three-dimensional experience into things that were not in the here and now. They were lifetimes of history of fragmentation away. And I was physically, because of the distortion of that timeline, purging satanic and demonic consciousness for a very long period in the purification. So I didn't actually know who I was for quite a while. And this is what's very interesting around remembrance, is you can be brought into different visions and see different things. And I knew from the first memory that I was a high priestess. I just knew I was a very powerful priestess. And I started to see these rituals that I was in charge of in these temples. I knew that I was in charge of these sacred ceremonies and these sexual alchemy processes. And I started to see the distortions. I saw ceremonies which included cannibalism. I saw ceremonies that was sacrificial aspects of hearts. I saw ceremonies of distortions around innocent or young children. I saw a lot of really horrific things very, very quickly. And I was like, I am a fucking horrible person. That was what came up. I am a horrible person. If I was involved in all of this, then like I had to do a lot of compassion, a lot of healing, and a lot of work there. How could I have done that? Now, as I learned her, as I remembered her, I understood that she had a very distorted lens on purity. So, like some of the gods and the goddesses of ancient Egypt, some descended into the underworld. Now, I can give you a list of some of those. We've got Sekhmet. We have the Inanna. I don't know if she was in Egypt, but she definitely went from the time before. You have Akhenaten, you have Set, you also have Osiris, you have Anubis. The scorpion goddess, I believe, also did. There's a whole list, right? So there's a whole list that ended up. What is her name? We'll say that about half and half, right? So this is division of yin and yang polarity, right? That's what happened. Egypt was a time of extreme polarization. That's where masculine and feminine and light and dark aspects of masculine and feminine were created. This was the timeline that before this, a masculine energy was just masculine. There was no dark, there was no light. A feminine energy was just feminine. It wasn't fragmented. There was not fragmentations that took place around specific points of the psyche. Egypt really, really fragmented the human psyche based on the level of magic that was being created and the distortions that took place, and pushing the boundaries beyond the alignment of God Source Creator. And so in this time, the fragmentations that occurred have influenced the human consciousness for the rest of the experience, right? So there's many of you, and there are many of us that are journeying our Egyptian consciousness to purify ourselves, but in that it purifies the human psyche, and it allows for this opportunity for a higher evolved expression beyond the distortion, because there are more pathways that are without this separation point of belief systems. And so in this, what I came to know and realize was that Egypt, where do I start? So much to share. So let's start with the depiction of the gods and the goddesses. So the gods and the goddesses are assumed to be taller, and they're to have different shaped heads, and the way that they are written in the wall cavings and in the hieroglyphs is that they do look different to the other human beings. So there is a sense that they were of a different physical expression. Now, this is true. So these gods and goddesses that came in with a higher vibrational expression to be able to be this magical in form were genetically modified. inside. So their vessel was created in a lab. Now, this lab was what we consider Anubis's passageway into the reincarnation cycle, or between the worlds, where you pass over and you have to give a offering to move through the realms, right? So this is where we gave up parts of ourselves and we made exchanges to be here as a human being on this planet, or to be in service in some way. So this realm that Anubis was in charge of is what you could consider a very highly evolved laboratory that had clones and vessels of creation. And so they were, and this is in the two-dimensional realm. So there's a portal that would come down where spaceships from Sirius down the Orion's belt would come down, and they would land, and they go actually down through the pyramids into the two-dimensional existence, so just below the Earth's surface. Some would consider this now as some aspects, we could call them the inner crystal cities. We could also call it Agatha. There's a dimensional realm that is two-dimensional, which was a lab where, if you have had remembrance, you'll find that genetic modification in the labs were inside mountains. They were inside different portal points where you could bring a consciousness through and land it into a physical vessel. So we could say they were the womb, right? We had lots of womb centers in mountains, underground, and in different places. So this specific area was guarded by Anubis. And you would come down from wherever you were assigned from to come to Earth with your mission. And you would come into a vessel that was created specifically and coded specifically for your mission, with your information and how you could hold that frequency in physical form. And that is why the depiction of them is different, because they were a differently genetically created vessel than a human vessel. A human vessel at that time was a three-dimensional human being, and did not have a capacity with consciousness that could hold a frequency that is that high. And that is still why we are challenged in the now moment to hold and remember our consciousness, because the vessel itself in a three-dimensional human being does not have the capacity without genetic modifications to be able to attain and remember this level of information from beyond the point of universal consciousness. And so those that have ascended beyond universal consciousness have genetic modifications. Now, a genetic modification in this incarnation is considered light technology. You have a genetic upgrade where there is specific frequencies that are placed within your cellular structure. You are basically put into psychic surgery, and you are cut up and rewired and placed with specific information in your sleep state, in the womb, in all aspects. Your light body can sometimes be taken out of your physical body, and it can go up into different councils and surgeries and be upgraded and then placed back in your body. And that can be a time where you feel disassociated, disconnected, empty, you're confused. There is this physical vessel that I am in here today with my mission that I have chosen has undergone, I don't even want to say, but there's probably millions of different psychic surgeries and genetic modifications. The reason for that is that I chose to carry the Alexandria Library. The Alexandria Library is that of the library that was scripted in ancient Egypt, and that was where Thoth had sat down with each god and goddess who came with their individual codes, their information, and tracked what it was that they were here for, what their soul journey was, what their blueprint was, what they'd learnt from their previous incarnations, and what they were here for. So it has the information in the library or the book of records of each individual god and goddess, and those of, we could say, even the demigods, right? So this library had the library of universal creation, because those gods and goddesses, the Anunnaki, are the original creators of this human experiment, otherwise known as Earth or the human experience. And that was the library of this experience. So I have been coded in this reality with this library in my cells. Now, that's a lot of information to carry. I have started to, which is why you might be resonating to me. I probably have some of your information in my cells. I have got codes for you. I have got books for you. I have got access points for you. You can receive them here. You can ask my higher self, hey, what do you got there for me? Can I receive it back, please? I have placed much of it back into the earth, and I have placed a lot of it back into the Alexandria Library, which is not a physical library. It is a multidimensional library. And this information is holding the entire creation of this experience. So it holds the distortions and the correction codes. So I know that we're in multidimensionality, but that is Egypt for you. Is that this this library was then tracked, right? Because these gods and goddesses came. So for me, I was the goddess of communication, which I still do, right? I'm here to be a speaker of truth. Communication is a big part of my mission. The reason that her cult was so powerful is because she had an ability to relate and communicate and express the word through her channel. That was something that she was very cultivated in. And magic. So magic is where her ability to use light technology, not frequency and vibration, but beyond that, to bring in tangible transformation through conscious thought. And that was a part of her journey. She was in charge of what is called the Baraka process, or the purification process, which is still my role in this incarnation. So my role here in this incarnation is to do exactly what I did then, only from a purified lens, because that was a distorted lens, and to assist from the purification of what is in alignment with God, Source, Creator, without the manipulation, without the coercion, without the entrapment, to allow people to transcend the human ego. So it is a transcendence process. It is the process of activating, clearing, purifying, solidifying, and opening all 7 chakra systems, so that when you open all chakra systems, you have a pillar of light that you can use to create a different reality, to create magic in the world, to be superhuman. Now, the distortion aspect of that was that there was mutations made to different chakras. You might see this depicted in some of the gods, Akhenaten, for example. And it's no different now. You just don't see it the same. So some of us come here with a very developed heart. Some come with a very developed root chakra, right? This is where most of our medicine and our codes are. Now, Akhenaten had a very developed, we'll say, what would you call that? The pineal. So his head, right? He had a really long head. He had a capacity with with consciousness, we'll say, right? So he had a capacity with consciousness, and he also had a really big belly. So he had this oversized sacral chakra. So there was a genetic modification in the sacral and the crown that gave him more ability in sacral, so power and consciousness. Now, that in a purified form is amazing. That in a distorted form is why he convinced an entire civilization that instead of having all gods to come into oneness and seeing the unique perspectives and honoring everyone as a different mirror to what the gifts were, that you have to come through me to meet the one God, right? So he had, with his abilities and his distortion and his need for power, because he had an oversized sacral chakra that was not connected to the heart of truth and had forgotten his original mission to the Emerald Order and to the Law of One, that he became power hungry and very manipulative. And that is how he has influenced consciousness. He's been an extremely power hungry and manipulative being. He's also known as Murdoch. So if you want to go and research the king of the world, you'll get a bit of an understanding of that energy signature. Now, for me, in this incarnation, and the interesting thing is that him in this incarnation has that oversized or developed chakra. So he still has to move through the same distortion templates, come into the purification, and remember his connection to God. Now, in a purified expression, that amount of power with consciousness is absolutely transformative. Like, imagine how beautiful that is. So this but yes, again, I can hear you go. So how many of these gods and goddesses are incarnated on the earth at the moment? Majority. So most of them are here. I have been grateful enough to meet many of them, and they are in different pockets around the world, different sacred lands that hold the original information of the original creation of the earth. So places like what held the lands of Lemuria and Atlantis. So those pockets of land that were connected, that's where most of the divine race or the original seeders are located. And that's because they're going back there to remember and to correct the inversions that were made in the grid lines. Now, the goddess Isis, she had a very developed heart and crown. Okay, so her crown and her heart, that is no different to me now. I still have a very developed crown and heart. And the crown and the heart chakra, if you think about the heart, there was such the tears of Isis, or Isis is the story, right? She, her tears, oh God, her tears. I have cried so many of her tears. They are like milk, and they're icy, and they are painful to cry. Her biggest challenge and her biggest distortion point was that her attachment to purity, to the mission. So she had a massive attachment to purity and to the mission. That became very distorted in her creations and in her choices of connections and counterparts. And she also had a very connected crown chakra, in which why she could speak and channel information. And in this Baraka process, or these temples, what would happen is, there's so many things to say. The gods and the goddesses would go through initiations to start to master their consciousness through their new vessel. So they would go through ceremonial practices as a way to actually anchor and hold their pillar of their god or the goddess. Now, these ceremonies were a little bit icky, right? I think I have spoken about this online before, but one of these processes was teaching the masculine, or the divine masculine god, or the god, how to hold his pillar in all situations so he didn't fragment, right? So this is where the distortion of purity comes in, is these ceremonies and these different practices were teaching you how not to fragment from God. Problem is that what you were doing was you were doing something intentional that would cause a fragmentation. And so one of these was where a god and a goddess were paired up, and they would sit across from each other in their meditation pose, and they would connect into source frequency, and they would be in divine union. And when it was the male's initiation time to hold his pillar of strength, the goddess took a blade to his foreskin and cut his foreskin off, and he was supposed to sit there, hold and anchor his connection to source, and to hold it as if nothing was happening, as if you could alchemize, heal, and be in complete love and gratitude for this experience, to be in this place of attainment. And she was then to take this as an offering and an anointment and take on his codes and information through ingesting his physical offering through cannibalism. Now that's pretty fucked up, right? Super fucked up. That is what caused the original fragmentation of the masculine, and that was Set. So Set, we love Set. Set has got a very wounded, broken heart. He's got a lot of things that from the feminine distortions. I facilitated that ceremony, so I take complete accountability and ownership for my distortions of that point that were done through much manipulation, but I still partook in that. I was a part of this idea that this is how you purify and hold a being in their attainment. Like I have cried many tears. Okay, so I can talk about it now because I have spent 18 months crying and vomiting and purging. And the interesting thing about Isis was because of her ability with magic, she did some very interesting things because she knew what she was doing was wrong. And this was where her distortions with relationships came in. So Osiris is not as yummy as what we all like to think, right? Osiris is actually very patriarchal. He had a lot of control, jealousy, a lot of different things that were there. Isis and Set actually had a sweet, pure, innocent love from up in the galaxy, in galactic consciousness. That caused a rift. That's why he got chopped up. There's a lot of things. There's so many things. So this was hard, right? Because the facilitator of your love pairs you up with another goddess, right? So there's betrayal, there's manipulation, there's confusion. Why someone that would love you would put you in a situation like that to train you. And then there was, from my end, to Set, if you can imagine this by placing yourself in this dynamic, is when this took place and his pillar started to shake, that the facilitator, right, this is the superiority complex that comes in, is, oh, okay, you're not a good enough God. You can't hold yourself. You can't anchor. You can't meet me. You can't be that of what is expected of you in this empire, right? So there's this, which is where Set became the mockery of this this experience, and that caused a lot of wrath for him. He ended up in absolute anger and resentment to all of the other gods and the goddesses because of this projection that he wasn't man enough, or wasn't powerful enough. And so he proved himself to be powerful through some pretty disruptive things, which is where the black magic started to come in. This is where sorcery started to come in. This is where it just rippled upon rippled upon rippled, then until you forget that you're even in a war. You don't even know that you've stepped so far from God, because it's like one fragmentation upon one other. So Egypt did start as purity. So you may remember, if you haven't had any remembrance, that it was all light. And I used to see, I was like, it was all light, and then it was dark. Like it was demonic. All I could see was demonic. I just remembered the light. And I've never, it's fascinating for me because I never really saw too much of the light. All I really was able to see was all of the darkness, because there was just so much mutation of power. There was so much confusion. And so I'm like I'm jumping into many different stories. So I'm just like sharing what wants to come up. But in this, in that fragmentation, okay, that was the original fragmentation of the masculine, where there was a consciousness of light and dark. Set created this consciousness of the light masculine and the dark masculine. His light masculine played out with Isis, and his dark masculine played out with Osiris. And so this rivalry. Now, okay, this is another thing. brothers and sisters. We were not brothers and sisters. We were not even genetically compatible. It's where you look at divine family, where we say, you're my brother. Hello, brothers and sisters, right? We're not genetically connected. We are from the level of soul family, right? So there was no genetic connection. This is where there's another distortion around mutations of genes and bloodlines being crossed and all kinds of things that get brought into this reality that are just untrue and confuse us even more from what is the truth, really? Like, what is the truth? And in that, basically, to further talk about Set, because apparently he wants to be spoken about right now, Set's love for Isis, and their love was very pure. It was childlike. It was actually really sweet. But Isis, had a very she had a role to uphold. She was the queen. She had to be in charge of certain things. There was a lot of pressure and expectation on her, and it was inappropriate for her to be with or behave in specific ways. And because of this pressure and all of these things that she was conducting in and being responsible for, and to be that queen to a very powerful ruler, such as Osiris, who was starting to bring in these more patriarchal control constructs, it was for her love to Set was this playful part that got to bring out her essence, and she got to be met in an expression of herself that was not appropriate in any other times. And you would see this part of my essence quite often if you've watched any of my transmissions. I am extremely playful, and I bring the play and I bring the quirkiness, and I am very childlike because I've integrated all of those aspects, and all of me is welcome, and I will be all of me in every situation all of the time, and I will not wear a mask, and I will not hide, and I will not say this is spiritual and this isn't and this is powerful, because it's not true. It's all distortion. And so in that, Osiris found out about this love affair. There was jealousy, and basically Osiris took to Set with a blade. He actually confronted Set. So this is not known in our history, right? You can't trust anything on the internet. And it's like it's half truths. It gives you a half depiction of the reality. So if you know that you are maybe connected to a specific thing, go for the activation. But if you really want to know, you have to go into the place of your own memory stores, because this reality is distorted, and they will not let you see the truth because they don't want you to remember. And so Osiris took a blade to Set, and that was like the betrayal. And that was where he actually went to Ra, and Ra was a spaceship. Okay, so spaceship up in up in the ether, and Ra sat up there as, I guess, a bit of a overseeing, higher guiding god that would assist the civilization and the gods and the goddesses for counsel in what was okay and what wasn't. So he went up there and he received this specific technology, we'll say, and what happened, and what has happened many, many times in different experiences, is that as soon as you receive a technology and you have an ill intent or a fragmentation, a dark matter consciousness, you create an inversion. Now, Set received this technology because Ra was aware that Osiris was actually starting to control and lose contact with the Law of One teachings. So this was where he was witnessing, Set was witnessing Isis being manipulated. This was before all of the demonic ceremonies. Some of the things that were not quite right? And in that not quite rightness, he was to basically overthrow Osiris. And it was to disarm Osiris from the kingdom, and to bring in order, to bring in divine justice. So that was what Set was seeing. Now, I can't exactly. Okay, yes, I can. Ma'aria tutukuyana. I've journeyed so much of this that sometimes the memory can get it overlaps. So what happened was he came down and there was a dinner party, and he was to overthrow basically through this power source Osiris. And what happened was, because everyone was so manipulative, there was actually a poisoning that took place of Set, and in that poisoning that was of his lover, which was Isis's sister. What was her name? I still have to clear something there. But Set's partner, you would have seen it in the Gods and the Goddess movie. There's a name for her. And she found out about the love affair as well, right? So she was bitter and she poisoned Set. And so there was all these entanglements. Now, this is what entanglements of consciousness create. You've got a fragmentation here. You've got this person doing this. These are powerful consciousnesses that created our human experience. And this experience then, what happened was that the dark matter through this poison entered Set. So his pure intention, he was pure of heart until he was poisoned. Now, we can look at this very metaphorical as well. We're pure of heart until we are poisoned by bitterness, till we are poisoned by alcohol, till we are poisoned by someone's ill intent. And there becomes this dark matter aspect that is cultivated inside of the physical body. And so his overthrowing then became that of what did take place. So there was an experience where Osiris was cut into lots of different pieces and thrown into the River Nile and eaten by crocodiles. And the part of where he was put back together is missing information, right? So the reason that there was a desperation to get all of his pieces and put him back together was not because of their love, right? So there was not because of their love. Isis was actually quite pissed off at him for all of the experiences that took place, all of the mutations, all of the things, because it was such a distorted point, and everyone was forgetting who they were. Everyone was causing pain, and it was like chasing your tail. And why she put him back together was because of his codes and templates. So he held important information for the mission. So this is where she was super distorted in her own thinking. She would do anything to ensure the mission of purity and the Emerald Order would happen. Now, that is no different to me in this incarnation. And I have seen multiple times where I've been extremely manipulative in this incarnation to the other gods and the goddesses that I do know, and to different consciousnesses and to myself, so that I could meet my mission directive. Now, I do not choose manipulation anymore. I do not choose coercion. I do not choose to gaslight myself to line up to a specific time point juncture. I choose to receive that truth, only that truth, and line up to the truth through whatever discomfort I need to meet within myself and how I show up. But that was not my way. And so that has been a big alchemy process for me, because in this, Isis put Osiris back together. She had the capacity because she's connected to Ninasag. So if you know anything about Ninasag was the master geneticist that created the first fifth dimensional human being. Isis has the ability with the elixir of life, bringing people back from the dead. It's a light technology. It's basically what it is. And it's activated within me now is mass amounts of chi that comes in and pumps the body full of life force energy. Now, that can regenerate and bring someone or something back to life. It's a healing ability. And the difference was that because she was so skilled with light technology and telepathically, she moves through the quantum field very fast, like a hummingbird. She could literally sit on the side of the River Nile and hummingbird through the River Nile and gather his pieces and bring them back and put them back together. Now, this is was simply to bring back his templating and his information. Now, that is just one story of how mutated and distorted this experience was, right? Now, I want to bring another piece up because it feels really important to bring in, is that because there is such a distortion around women in connection and power, there's a distortion around priestesses. And there's a story that a priestess can't be a mother, or a priestess can't be in service to the divine or God and to family. And so that's something that's carried through into this incarnation. So there's everything from our history exists in our now. It's not separate. They're all there. And you may resonate to some of these distortions and realize that you have them within you in some form, and they show up in really weird ways, right? So cannibalism, for instance, might be that you have a fetish or a desire to bite someone's neck. It could be that you want to devour them. And sometimes that devouring is actually connecting into such a depth of union. So there's many different multiple layers of how these distortions show up. You might have a fear. So for me, I had a big fear of knives my entire life. I had a massive fear of knives. And I would see a blade that would come across my wrist. Now, in that incarnation, through the many journeys, at the end of one of her experiences, she was in so much desperation that she actually took a blade to her wrists and used magic to create some distortions to entrap Akhenaten and to stop him from his over domination of the world, basically. Which sounds so crazy. I realize how crazy I sound sometimes. But I sound crazy for anyone who hasn't remembered, right? That's exactly what it is. If you have remembrance and you're feeling in your body, you're going to be like, I don't know if I can believe this, but there's some part of me that feels like this is true. Because it sits within yourselves. You were probably there in some way. You may have been a part of the experience. You may have these cellular memories. You might be a bloodline, like a direct descendant to Set. You might be a direct descendant to Osiris. You might be a direct descendant to Isis. And so these things resonate in your body, and you're like, this sounds like a movie, right? How could that possibly be real? Look at your movies. Your sci-fi movies, absolute truth. Really crazy, right? I would refuse as a child, up until I was literally probably 2 years ago, I refused to watch sci-fi and fantasy. I wouldn't watch it. I was like, no, not watching that stuff. If I had of, I would have blown my circuitry system. It would have been way too much remembrance. I wouldn't have been able to cope because of how I function in my energy field, that things just vibrate and I'm all of a sudden in the memory. That's movies for me are huge activations, or have been. I don't need those so much now because I have remembered. I'm also not looking at any of the comments at the moment, by the way, just because I'm trying to stay focused on whatever is wanting to come through. So in relation to the priestesses, and there's a lot of mutation around priestesses, right? So they have some core beliefs. The core beliefs is that their bodies belong to men for healing. Their core beliefs is that their sexual energy is to be used to assist in power. Their womb spaces have been used for the creation of men, and we're not talking children. We're talking around using their creation powers and their vessels for different things. So the priestess has a lot of distortion in the sacral chakra and the root chakra. There's a lot of fragmentation there through lifetimes of brutality, and then also lifetimes of giving up one source connection in a mutation of offering to man. But one of the things that is also there and is very current in the now experience of some healing aspects is that the woman that would have a child, the child was actually taken away at birth. So in the time of Osiris and Akhenaten's reign is that the powerful woman, the deities, their children would be taken from them at birth. Now, the children were only brought into the reality for the purpose of the empire. They were brought in with specific frequency and codes. There were specific gods and goddesses that mated to have powerful heirs. And these children were brought into the experience, and they were basically taken from 0 to 14, and they were in what you could consider like a village, or I wouldn't say that it was an orphanage, but like a boarding school where individual beings, specific caregivers, would look after the children, and they were not in the temple spaces in the empire, in the structures. They were away. Now, there's a lot of abandonment wounding that sits there for those children, and there's a lot of heartache for women that have had to give up their children for the service to the greater mission and to the picture. And this fragmentation has moved through. That is something that is holding a lot of heartache to the woman and child, that is to be cleared in the distortion of our current reality, that woman can't be mother and be of service. Now, we see this everywhere in reality, right? And then we see women that are trying to do both and becoming masculine to do it because of the amount of fragmentation that has occurred. And this took place, and then at 14 they would come back and they would start to go through their purification process, their transcendence process. So they were initiated. They would come back in and they were initiated. They were not treated in a loving or compassionate way, in the way that we see mother and child. They were there for the mission. They were there to be trained. They were there and brought in very specifically for a specific role, and that was it. And so there was a coldness around the mother, father, child trinity. And there's been a lot of mutation because of that. And in that, they would then start to go through these initiation processes. And these initiation processes are sometimes done by their parental figures. And so there is a lot of pain points for that as well, that they were initiated through different levels of mastery by their parental figures, but not in the love and the compassion of what humanity is. And then there was what is called the divine or the holy golden children. So the golden children came in. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because there is currently a group of golden children that are wanting to be birthed into our current now reality. These golden children hold a very high frequency of angelic light. These are children that cannot come into physical incarnation until there is a transcendent purified male and a transcendent purified female that come into divine union and anchor that level of source to bring through a holy child. So this holy child cannot have one purified parent. The Trinity has to be of purity of source. Otherwise, there's going to be forgetting, there's going to be distortions, there's going to be mutations, there's going to be a lot of different things, which we've already done in Egypt, right? So these holy, divine, golden children were created in a different way, right? So they weren't created back in Egypt in the way of a mother and a father having sexual alchemy and birthing it into the world. These golden children were genetically modified, and they were genetically modified by taking the gods' codes and genetics and the goddesses' codes, genetics, and creating a specific vessel down in what I spoke to earlier in Anubis's experimental lab of the Baria Tutukuya, and I will call it the underworld of someone. It's not the underworld, the between worlds, the under earth. The cloning facility, and in there, these golden children were specifically coded, and so they were a unique bringers of light. They were actually here, and they were brought in at a specific time of Egypt to assist the transition out of the darkness that was getting created. So near the end of the fall of ancient Egypt. Now, this is where we're currently in this present timeline transitioning. So the fall of ancient Egypt then transitioned into what is called the forgotten timeline. And there's not any information on this really. It has been snuffed, suppressed, and hidden. I didn't have the full awareness of this because there's only the distorted fall of the purity timeline that is mentioned in history, and that is ancient Rome or ancient Greece, at the very, very, very beginning of that civilization. And so there was a transition point from ancient Egypt into ancient Rome. And what happened was that these holy children came in with specific coding to bring in this new purity light. Now, these children got to stay in the empire. These children were considered prophets. These children were the original code carriers of Christ. Okay, so they actually held the original code carriers of Christ. They were not Christed, but they held the codes of Christ. Now, Yeshua was also created in a lab. He was not birthed into the world in the way the Bible expresses it. Yeshua's vessel was also a holy child, a divine child that came to bring a second wave of this mission because we royally fucked it up in Egypt. And there was a next bringing of Christ. Okay, so although Yeshua managed to do that, and the rest didn't quite finish it the same way, this is why the Christ consciousness was created through Yeshua, because he was one of the code carriers. There was many code carriers for this energy, but he was the one that held it, anchored it, and brought it into this reality. And these holy children are moving through their current distortions and assistance of this purity consciousness, because as this purity consciousness gets reconciled in the past, it gets reconciled in the now. Now, if we have more purity consciousness and Christ coding and anointing that is taking place, what happens is the opportunity for a man and a woman to access this and to transcend their human identity and to come into their full divine feminine, their divine masculine presence, so that they can then come together in the unity of God Source Creator. And if they choose through sovereign free will and choice, have a golden child that they bring in as these prophecies that are coming into the earth. Now, it's a lot of information there, right? And the other children, and so how this all makes sense is depending on who you were, what role you were, how long you've been on the earth, what you're holding in your cells, it all is, we are moving through these time-space dimensions from a different lens of perspective, but we are recreating history. Okay, we are recreating history, but we are doing it from a lens of a different consciousness perspective. So we are doing exactly that. So right here, right now, at this point in time, we are in the fall of ancient Egypt. So the fall of ancient Egypt and my role in that, which was also many tears of reconciliation and clearing and purifying that timeline, was that what happened was basically because Isis has an amazing channel and she is very connected and tapped in. She had a moment of profound awakening and remembering. And she had a transcendent remembrance of Source, where Source came in and was reminding her of the mission and that everyone had forgotten. And that was heartbreaking to her. She realized, she looked around, she had one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, how did this happen, right? We have strayed so far from why we came. I forgot why I was here, right? So we've all woken up. If you're here, you've woken up. You've had a moment where you're like, oh my goodness, everything that I thought was true and real is not true and real. So she had that in her own way. The others did not have that. And she went around and she basically begged everyone to see what she was seeing. Now, we can all relate to this story, I'm sure. Everyone that wakens goes, can't you see the reality? It's not real, right? And there's this desperation to wake everyone up from the entrapment programs and from the matrix reality that is there, that we've all created together. And so what happened was she went around and she went and visited every god and goddess, and she desperately begged. And the last being that they all ignored her, right? Just like your friends and your family ignored you and thought you were crazy. So she has had to move through you're crazy and you're wrong, right? So I get that projection a lot from my brothers and sisters of me being crazy and not seeing reality and truth, and that I don't understand God. So that is a projection that still plays out in my current reality. I don't take it on because I know truth, and I've actually moved and transcended beyond that, and they're still moving through their distortions, and that's okay. But in that time, I did not experience that. So I was in desperation. I was in panic. I was like, oh my God, this is so not okay. This is not all right. This reality is wrong. And I went through that awakening process and begged and was shut down and rejected and turned down and quite broken. And the last goddess that she went to was Sekhmet. Now, Sekhmet is the goddess of chaos and war, and she's one powerful goddess. And it was down by the River Nile, and Isis was sitting there, and she was literally on her hands and knees crying and begging for her sister, or her beloved sister, her goddess connection, a divine union to remember. And she turned and she scoffed, and she flew off and just started creating havoc in the atmosphere. Now, Isis was absolutely heartbroken. She had done the best that she could in her state of being, which was quite traumatized and mutated, which is what many of us can relate to. Is there's this a desperation that comes up where we have to change the world because the world is wrong. We have to get everyone to see that the world is wrong so that we change it. We don't realize that it's us that we need to see and that we need to forgive and we need to change. We want to awaken everyone else. And so she sat there in this desperation and this sadness, and she cried and 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 cried. And the River Nile started to overflow. Because she's the goddess of magic, she had this moment where she had distorted purity because she was not purified at this point. She was broken, and she was like, what do? I need to do something. And she did what everyone does in their awakening journey. She met wrath with wrath. And this distortion of activism, we could call it. And she brought the waters up, and she was responsible for the what we could call the Great Deluge of Egypt through her tears and through her magic, where she decided she would purify that civilization and wipe it out. And so she's responsible for a lot of death, and she's responsible for a lot of things that caused a split. So this is what we're in right now, is the split. The split between the beings that chose to move into the purity consciousness and to actually go through their purification, through that process, and remember and move into what we consider ancient Rome or ancient Greece, and start this hidden and forgotten timeline, which did have an anchored purity in it, or there was a dissension. And so many descended into the underworld at this point. And this is where a lot of what we see in history starts to get really interesting, right? And we are currently in that point of a choice. So we can say that history doesn't matter and past lives don't matter, but if we're recreating history from different timeline perspectives and we're reverse engineering, then we are recreating from that same energy, from that same thought, from that same belief, from that same cycle, from a different awareness of truth of self. And so we have an opportunity at this point to go, what did I do then? If I was here on the earth, Where was I? What did I choose? And what am I choosing now? Am I choosing purity, or am I choosing separation and control and dissension and the 7 deadly sins? Because that's what the choice was. It was either to purify and move beyond and actually remember why we came, or choose a different lens. And that is kind of where you can sit and reflect of what are you currently choosing? What is it that is required for you? Are you attached to 7 deadly sins? Are you attached to the human reality? What about the human reality is still attached to? Because the separation point of light and dark is getting quite strong in the division. So I am choosing purity. That is why I'm here. And purity from the pure lens, right? I'm here to be a vessel of purity. I'm here to be a Christos carrier. I'm here to assist in the anointment of Christ, the second coming of Christ. I'm here to educate. I'm here for other beings that know that what I'm speaking is truth, and remind them of who they are through my remembrance of truth. And that in that, there has been a big separation point. So where I am going in purity consciousness and Christ, a lot of my beloved brothers and sisters are not coming this way. They're actually moving through a descended consciousness of remembering. So it's not saying they won't remember. It's not saying that they won't line up to their highest timeline. It's not saying that they won't even finish their mission in this incarnation cycle. But they are not doing it in the way that I am choosing. So they're not in my vortex or reality anymore, completely off my timeline. And everyone's mission directives have actually shifted and changed because of sovereign free will and choice. So what was is no longer what is. And that is where there's a clean slate and a new opportunity for us to take accountability and responsibility for where we are affecting our own current now reality, but where we have affected consciousness in the past as well. I invite you to look at taking ownership in this moment, through this transmission of all its quirkiness and all of its craziness and all of the things that you're like, whoa, she is definitely a little out there. That you, out of all of this, you go, what am I accountable for? What do I need to take accountable for in this now moment? What is it that I have created in my reality where I have caused harm, where I have caused separation, where I've caused hurt? What is it here in my current experience that requires me to take accountability and ownership for, to meet that within myself? So that I can cry the tears, so I can feel the heartache, so I can release the point where I disconnected myself from my worthiness or my love of God, where I can reclaim my authentic self and actually stand and anchor in my light. If I'm here to be a bringer of change, if I'm here to reconcile history and to be a creator of the new earth, then what is it within me that I need to meet so I can step into that purified expression and move forward? I love you. I love you. I love you. I actually would love to go explore Thailand, Phuket. I've been here for a few days and I haven't done anything. So I'm going to go on an adventure and alchemize my life experience. If you resonate to this interesting information, I would absolutely love for you to like, subscribe, and share this transmission with anyone who you may feel would get some remembrance or activations from it. There is a lot of information that moves through the ether in these expressions. If you are someone that feels like you are on the journey of remembering aspects of this, that you need some support in coming into the purity of your divine expression, maybe you resonate to being a bringer of change, one of the original divine race, the Anunnaki, and you're ready to commit to meeting these aspects. I do one-on-one mentoring with very committed and devoted individual beings. there are some conferences, a bit more mainstream. I don't even know how I'm going to merge these worlds, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to be a bridge between spirituality and 3D humanity. And so there is a conference that is going to be worldwide. It's actually called Convergence, where spirit meets mind and merges. So it's like spiritual TED Talks. It is a 2-day seminar where we're going to have influential speakers that will talk about science and spirituality, community building, new business structures, quantum energetic work. It's not just coaching and personal development. It's around really breaking people's minds open. So if you know any speakers that would really fit this paradigm of changing reality, please inbox me. My email is geeia.ariati@gmail.com. So you can contact me there. The first conference or seminar is going to be on the 1st and the 2nd of November in the Gold Coast, Australia. So I will be returning back to the Gold Coast, Australia, but it will be touring worldwide. So this is going to be an extremely transformative and life-changing event because it's not just looking at personal development. There is a lot of integrative practices. So where you can start to integrate what your mind has just received into your cellular structure, recalibrate, and using mindfulness to come into the state of true authentic self. So to do that, we will do that right now. So everything that you have just received, whether or not you have fully understood it or not, anything within your cellular structure, I'm going to invite you now to close down your eyes and to take 3 deep breaths with me. So we're going to breathe from our toes to our crown. And breathing out with a sigh. Breathing in from the toes to the crown. And breathing out. Breathing in. And breathing out. And in this moment, I want you to focus on your heart. Focusing your attention on your heart. And we're going to ask that all information that is in vibrational resonance, that has allowed you to ascend beyond any limitation, that the energy and the frequency of that which you be here in the now, that is your truth, through sovereign free will and through your source alignment, is instantaneously integrated into your cellular structure. That your atoms, your molecules start to vibrate in the knowing of this. That all information, visions, remembrance, and cognitive awareness come into this point of anchoring into every aspect of your consciousness. That we ask that your neuro pathways start to recalibrate, rewire, and move into a new state of receptivity, of receiving consciousness in a new form of truth aligned with your sacred heart. And in that, I'd like you to take a deep breath in that recognition, realization, and request. Exhaling it out. Allowing now for any of your DNA to shift and move as we ask to anchor this into the roots of your feet and down into your Earth Star chakra, to ground this into your human experience, that this is a possibility, that you can function from the human lens in all layers of consciousness, and remember your one source connection. As you are in and out, above and below, starting to envision a torus field where you are alchemizing or moving energy from the above and the below, the in and the out. And allow in this moment to solidify that by taking 3 deep breaths into your heart, that this becomes you and you are this. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, And breathing out. Breathing in. And breathing out. It is done. It is done. It is already done. And gently opening your eyes. I love you. Ahava. Have an amazing weekend.